On my main channel, I just dropped a video where I reviewed some demos for upcoming games that I played recently. If you haven't yet, I definitely encourage you to check it out. I wanted to keep that video concise and focused on the games that I liked and thought had potential. For every game that I liked, though, there were just as many demos that I was lukewarm on or straight up hated. So even though some of my more mixed reviews were cut for time, I wanted to still include them here anyways. I tried to be as fair as possible in my judgment for all of these games, and I don't want it to seem like I'm being overly harsh or negative. Like I said, my positive reviews mainly went into that main channel video, so I implore you to check that out as well if you haven't. Anyways, on with the reviews. Lake is one of the only currently released games that I played over this stretch where I tried a bunch of demos. The Steam store page piqued my interest enough that I felt like checking it out. Trying before I buy, if you will. And I'm glad I did because, to be honest, while there is probably a certain someone out there for whom Lake will resonate with, for me it fell short in pretty much every category. The gameplay is basically a mail delivery sim, but also with a substantial story wrapped around it about a woman returning to her sleepy little hometown to deliver mail. Obviously, since I only played the demo, I only really scratched the surface of the story, but gameplay-wise, it already felt like I had seen everything. As a simulator, it isn't very deep mechanically, which I think would be just fine if the story was really great, but at least from what I experienced, it just wasn't. Don't get me wrong, the graphics were really nice, the voice acting was more than competent, but the writing and pacing was just bleh. The characters were all extremely one-dimensional, conversations went on far too long with very little payoff, and the demo offered very little in the way of story hooks that kept you really wanting to play more. If you're looking for a straight-up delivery sim, play, I don't know, Euro Truck Simulator. If you're looking for a good story game, play like Firewatch or pretty much anything else with a story. This one is a no-go for me. Flappy Shooter is essentially exactly what it sounds like, and it doesn't pull any real punches. It's a roguelike Flappy Bird with guns. The premise is fun enough that you might be intrigued enough by it to sustain you for about the duration of the demo. And even though I more or less enjoyed my time with it, I don't really see myself returning to Flappy Shooter, at least not on PC. For this game to succeed on PC, it's going to have to offer a lot more than what is there currently, which is pretty bare bones and offers little in the way of variety. And it could really use like a tutorial or maybe just something on the screen explaining some of what is going on. The 3D art style is kind of perplexing as well. The hitboxes and stuff like that were pretty confusing and didn't feel very consistent. I think the game could easily be remade in a 2D pixel art style, much like the original Flappy Bird, and be better for it. Either way, it's fun enough as a gimmick and not much more. The formula is there for this to be a decent little mindless mobile game, but if it costs even a few bucks on Steam, it's going to be a probably not for me. Critadel takes familiar roguelike and platformer concepts and mashes them together into something that is different, but not exactly new. It's like an anime roguelike Metal Slug. I had some immediate complaints about the feel of the game, like the movement was a bit weird and it was a bit unclear what you could and couldn't shoot through or be shot through. And enemy variety was a bit wonky. Like some enemies were basically pointless free kills and others were just like straight up unfair walking bullet hells. And keep in mind, this was just the first level. The biggest form of replayability seems like it will come from the massive amounts of guns and potential builds that seem to be possible here. Think like Enter the Gungeon or Synthetic. The demo is far too short for me to really assess the replayability in a meaningful way, but the weapon and build variety seemed very extensive from the glimpse that the demo gave. If you can overlook a bit of jank, Critadel might just be a game for you if you really like these kinds of qualities in a roguelike. For me, it's a definite wait and see. Side note, this game is out now on Steam and available for $20. I'm not sure how the full version has changed from the demo, but at that price point, it's probably a no for me. But I'm still interested in picking it up on sale eventually, because I did like what was there in the demo, at least enough to check it out in the future. Split has some things working for it, but twice as many detracting from what is a pretty solid idea at its core. Split is a cyberpunk puzzle game, although the cyberpunk theming may as well be a completely moot point. Even in just the demo, I had to sit through like 10 minutes of pretty cringy, fanficky exposition before I could even play a single second of the actual game, only for none of it to really matter or have really any bearing on the gameplay. The gameplay itself is a bit similar to something like Braid, I guess, but in 3D. Basically, you can rewind time to create copies of yourself so you could do multiple tasks at once. For example, pushing buttons in the right order to open a door, or killing a drone that would otherwise threaten you so that you can continue to move forward. While I like the idea, pretty much every system needs to be rethought or at least polished in some way. Rewinding is slow. And if you have to do it multiple times to solve a puzzle, which you often do, you are going to spend more time rewinding than actually solving the puzzle. The demo also lacked a pretty significant amount of variety. I have to imagine the full game might go more directions with these mechanics, but I did like 10 puzzles only to find each and every single one of them being some combination of destroying drones and pushing buttons. On the bright side, the art style is really nice, and there were a handful of truly mind-bending moments that I experienced in the puzzles that the demo offered, although it was generally marred by the many flaws in the game's systems. I get the feeling that Split is still relatively early in development, so I will give it the benefit of the doubt. If I'm wrong and this does reflect the final state of the game, then I will almost definitely not be playing this game ever in the future. But I'll be generous and give it a probably not, with the potential for that to change if the devs do a significant amount of polishing and retooling what is otherwise a pretty cool general concept that deserves a better shell than this. Do you like Risk of Rain 2? I like Risk of Rain 2. In fact, it's basically the sole reason I checked out Chaos Crown after reading the Steam store page, because the description sounded like, well, Risk of Rain 2. But I should have trusted my gut on this one because there is essentially no reason to play Chaos Crown if you own Risk of Rain 2. Period. The art style, while fine, is more generic, and the progression system is just a much more traditional roguelike progression than Risk of Rain's escalating difficulty and chess system. Basically, you just take upgrades when you clear rooms, much more similar to something like Hades, but honestly even more simplistic than that. Beyond that, that is literally all that diverges from Risk of Rain in any meaningful way. Otherwise, characters are basically straight up ripped off of Risk of Rain 2. I played this game's version of the Huntress and mainly just found the abilities unintuitive and unresponsive versions of their Risk of Rain 2 counterparts. And beyond that, there is hardly anything at all in this game that I experienced that I wouldn't consider just categorically worse. Even though it wasn't outright awful, the only reason I could really see someone checking this game out is because they've done literally everything in Risk of Rain 2 and just absolutely need more. Even then, I'd much sooner recommend something even a little bit different like Gunfire Reborn or Ziggurat, as I think most of those people would still be disappointed with Chaos Crown, despite being an objectively playable and functional game. It is just worse in every way. It's a no from me.
Hit that like button.
Alright.
Smash that bell, hit that bell button, hit
Destroy my
bell
pussy.
button.
Subscribe to Dumper Man.